They threw my nameplate in the trash. That's how I knew the war had already begun. I stood in the doorway of what used to be my office, cradling 3-month-old Elena against my chest, staring at the empty space where my desk should have been. 12 weeks ago, I'd left this place as the senior investment advisor who'd brought in 40% of the firm's annual revenue. I'd walked out with my head high, my belly round with life, and a client portfolio worth billions. Now I was back, and apparently, I no longer existed. The carpet still bore the rectangular indentations from my mahogany desk. The walls showed lighter patches where my diplomas had hung. My bookshelf, my filing cabinets, my carefully curated art collection, all gone. Even the small plant Meredith had given me for my 5th anniversary with the firm had vanished. But it was the nameplate that got me. Someone had taken the brushed silver plaque that read, Paige Lambert, Senior Investment Advisor, and tossed it into the wastebasket like yesterday's coffee grounds. It sat there among crumpled papers and food wrappers, face down in garbage. I felt tears prick my eyes, but I blinked them back. Elena stirred against me, making those little whimpering sounds that meant she'd wake up hungry soon. I stroked her dark hair and tried to steady my breathing. The thing about being a mother is that you don't get to fall apart anymore. You don't get to cry in public or throw things or scream at the injustice of it all. You have a tiny human depending on you, and that means you have to be smart, you have to be strategic, you have to be absolutely ruthless. That's when I heard his voice. Dean Marshall, the managing director, all 6 feet 3 inches of condescending smugness, walking toward me with Lynette from HR trailing behind him like a nervous puppy. Both of them wore expressions of exaggerated concern that didn't quite reach their eyes. Dean stopped a few feet away, clasping his hands in front of him like he was about to deliver a eulogy. "Paige, welcome back. You look absolutely radiant." His voice dripped with the kind of enthusiasm that made my skin crawl. I'd worked alongside this man for 7 years. I knew exactly what his fake sincerity sounded like. I didn't smile. I didn't pretend everything was fine. Instead, I pointed at the wastebasket with my free hand, making sure my voice carried down the hallway, where I could see Troy and Philip lurking by the break room. "Where's my office? And is this how the firm welcomes back someone who spent 9 months carrying new life while still managing a $3.8 billion portfolio?" Lynette flinched. Dean's smile flickered for just a moment before he recovered. "Oh, Paige, there have been some structural changes while you were out. Nothing personal, of course. Just business." I laughed. It wasn't a pleasant sound. Structural changes? Or structural discrimination? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like the firm's new structure involves erasing women the moment they become mothers. Dean's jaw tightened. "That's a very serious accusation." "Is it?" I bent down, picked up my nameplate, and brushed off the coffee grounds clinging to it. Then I walked to the empty wall space and placed it carefully on the floor, leaning it against the baseboard like a memorial marker. Because it seems pretty straightforward to me. I leave for legally protected maternity leave. I return to find my office gone, my nameplate in the trash, and I'm guessing my clients have been conveniently redistributed? The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Lynette looked at her shoes. Dean's face went through several interesting color changes before settling on an uncomfortable red. "It's temporary," he finally said. "Troy and Philip have been servicing your major accounts during your absence. Just to ensure continuity of service, you understand." "Servicing my accounts." I repeated the words slowly, letting them hang in the air. "The accounts I spent 5 years building. The relationships I cultivated through late nights, weekend calls, and flying across the country at a moment's notice. Those accounts. We had to ensure our clients received uninterrupted attention." Lynette chimed in, her voice wavering slightly. "You were unavailable, and they had complex needs." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the fear there. She knew this was wrong. They all knew. I was on maternity leave, Lynette, not unavailable. There's a difference. And under federal law, my position should have been protected. That's when Garrett appeared. Garrett Chen, our CEO, 52 years old and absolutely certain the world revolved around his vision of success. He'd built this firm from nothing 20 years ago, and he ran it like a fiefdom. I'd respected him once. I'd even admired his ruthlessness in business. But that was before I realized his ruthlessness extended to his own employees. "Paige." He spread his arms wide as if preparing for a hug I absolutely was not going to give him. "What a surprise. I thought you weren't due back for another week?" I shifted Elena higher on my shoulder, using my daughter as both shield and weapon. I decided to come in early. Good thing, too. Otherwise, I might have missed this fascinating structural reorganization. Garrett's smile stayed fixed, but his eyes went cold. "We've actually been discussing how to best accommodate your new circumstances. We want to be family-friendly here, Paige." "We really do." "My new circumstances?" I kept my voice level, but I felt rage building in my chest like a living thing. "You mean the fact that I'm now a mother? That's what we're calling circumstances?" "Well," Garrett glanced at Dean, then back at me. "The reality is, your availability has changed. Your priorities have shifted. We need advisors who can give 100%, who don't have distractions that might interfere with client service. There it was, the word that made my blood boil. Distractions. I heard Troy laugh from down the hall. Actually laugh. Like this was entertainment. Philip joined in, both of them barely bothering to hide their amusement at watching me get put in my place. These were men I'd trained. Men who'd asked me for advice on their own client strategies. Men who now thought they could take what was mine simply because I dared to have a child. Something inside me shifted, clicked into place. I'd spent 12 weeks preparing for this moment, but I hadn't truly believed it would be this blatant, this openly discriminatory. They weren't even trying to hide it. I smiled. It was the kind of smile that should have warned them, but they were too arrogant to notice. "Let me make sure I understand," I said, my voice soft and dangerous. "You're telling me that carrying and delivering a healthy baby girl makes me less capable of managing billions in assets? That the same woman who brought in more revenue than any other advisor in this firm's history is suddenly incompetent because she became a mother?" "No one said incompetent," Garrett started, but I cut him off. "Then what are you saying?" "Because it sounds like you're saying that motherhood disqualifies me from doing the job I've excelled at for 7 years. The job where I consistently outperformed every single person in this building." I paused, looking directly at Troy and Philip. "Including the 2 comedians over there who are now apparently managing my accounts." Elena chose that moment to wake up, her small face scrunching up as she prepared to cry. I bounced her gently, soothing her with practiced ease while keeping my eyes locked on Garrett. "You know what the funny thing is? I can comfort my daughter and have this conversation at the same time. It's called multitasking. Women do it constantly. But apparently, that's too complex a concept for this firm to grasp." Garrett's face hardened. "Paige, I think you need to calm down. We're trying to help you here. We've created a new position that might be perfect for you. Coordinator of Client Relations. It's more flexible, better hours, less pressure, more suitable for someone with parenting responsibilities." "And the salary?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "Adjusted to reflect the reduced responsibilities. About 60% of your current compensation." I actually laughed out loud this time, startling Elena, who I quickly soothed. "So let me get this straight. You want to demote me, slash my salary by nearly half, and call it family-friendly? That's not accommodation, Garrett. That's retaliation." "That's business," he snapped, his patience finally wearing thin. "And if you don't like it, you're welcome to seek opportunities elsewhere." There it was, the threat, the barely veiled termination hanging over my head. He expected me to fold, to accept the demotion with gratitude, to slink away into obscurity rather than fight back. Troy and Philip had gotten bolder now, actually walking closer to watch the show. Troy crossed his arms and smirked. "It's actually a generous offer, Paige. A lot of places wouldn't even give you that option." I turned to him slowly. "Is that right, Troy? Tell me, when you took over my accounts, what did you tell my clients? Did you mention that I was on legally protected leave? Or did you imply that I'd abandoned them?" His smirk faltered. Just a little, but I saw it. "I bet you told them I was stepping back from my career. That I'd decided motherhood was more important than their portfolios. Didn't you?" I looked at Philip. "Both of you. You saw an opportunity and you took it. You thought a woman on maternity leave was easy prey. We were ensuring continuity," Philip said, but his voice lacked conviction. "You were stealing," I corrected. "But that's okay, because I've been doing some ensuring of my own." I reached into my bag, careful not to disturb Elena, and pulled out my phone. Lynette instinctively moved forward, looking nervous, as if she thought I was going to record this conversation. "Could you hold Elena for a moment?" I asked her sweetly. "I need both hands for this." Lynette looked panicked. I'm not really good with babies." "Just support her head. It's not complicated." I transferred Elena into Lynette's awkward arms, noting how the HR director held my daughter like she was a ticking bomb. "There you go. See, you're a natural." What Lynette didn't see was me taking several quick photos with my phone, her holding Elena with that terrified expression. The empty office space behind us, the nameplate still lying on the floor. Evidence. Everything was evidence now. I took Elena back, ignoring Lynette's visible relief, and looked at Garrett. "I need to make some calls. Is there somewhere I can go? Since my office seems to have been donated to charity." "Use conference room C," Garrett said dismissively. "And Paige, I'll need your decision about the new position by end of day." "Oh, you'll have my decision much sooner than that," I promised. I walked to conference room C with my head high, even as I heard Troy and Philip laughing behind me. Let them laugh. Let them think they'd won. I'd learned a long time ago that the most dangerous opponent is the one you underestimate. Conference room C was small, windowless, and clearly meant to make me feel small. I didn't care. I settled into a chair, arranged Elena in my arms, and sent a single text message to Meredith Anderson, my former assistant and now my co-conspirator. "Operation Sunrise. Go." The response came back immediately. Finally, they have no idea what's coming. No, they really didn't. Because what Garrett and his boys club didn't know was that I hadn't spent 12 weeks just changing diapers and recovering from childbirth. I'd spent 12 weeks building something they couldn't imagine, something that would destroy everything they'd taken from me and leave them with nothing but regrets. It started 3 months ago, 2 weeks before Elena was born. I'd come into the office for one last day before maternity leave, waddling and uncomfortable and exhausted. I'd wanted to tie up loose ends, brief my team, make sure my clients knew I'd be back. What I'd overheard instead had changed everything. I'd been in the supply room, retrieving some folders, when I heard Troy and Philip in the hallway. They hadn't known I was there. 12 weeks of Paige being gone, Troy had said, his voice gleeful. That's plenty of time to make those clients ours. You think we can convert them? Philip had asked. Are you kidding? She's about to have a baby. She's not coming back at full capacity, if she comes back at all. Women always say they will, but then reality hits. Diapers, sleep deprivation, all that maternal instinct crap. Her head won't be in the game. And if she does come back? Troy had laughed. Then we make sure she doesn't have anything worth coming back to. Garrett's already on board. He thinks she's a liability now anyway. Too much of a lawsuit risk if something goes wrong while she's distracted. Distracted by her own kid. Jesus, that's cold. That's business. Besides, we've been carrying her for years anyway. That had been the lie that made me see red. Carrying me? I'd trained both of them. I'd shared my strategies, my client relationships, my hard-won expertise, and this was how they repaid me? I'd stood there in that supply room, one hand on my enormous belly, feeling Elena kick against my ribs, and I'd made a decision. I wasn't going to fight this battle the way they expected. I wasn't going to come back and plead for my job, or file a complaint with HR, or try to win back my clients through traditional channels. I was going to burn their world down and build something better from the ashes. The first call I made was to Isabella Chen, the most ruthless employment lawyer in the state. I'd met her at a charity gala 2 years earlier and remembered being impressed by her reputation for taking on discrimination cases and winning them spectacularly. She agreed to meet me the next day. The second call was to Valerie Banks, one of my oldest and most loyal clients. Valerie managed a portfolio worth $800 million and sat on the board of directors for Atlantic Capital, the company Garrett had been trying to merge with for 3 years. She was also a mother of 4 and had no patience for sexist nonsense. They're going to push me out, I told her bluntly during our meeting. And they're going to tell you I left voluntarily. Valerie's eyes had narrowed. Like hell they are. I need you to trust me, I'd said. I have a plan, but it requires patience. And it requires you to play along for a few weeks. Can you do that? Tell me what you need. Over the next 2 weeks, before Elena arrived, I worked like a woman possessed. I met with 14 more of my top clients. Not all of them, just the ones I knew would understand. The ones who valued loyalty and competence over the good old boys network. I explained what was happening, what was coming, and what I intended to do about it. I'm starting my own firm, I told each of them. It won't happen immediately. I need to let them show their hand first, need to document everything for the legal case. But when I'm ready, I want you to come with me. Every single one said yes. Jonathan Reed, who managed a family trust worth $600 million. Patricia Martinez, whose tech fortune required complex, sophisticated strategies. David and Sarah Kowalski, who'd built a pharmaceutical empire and trusted me implicitly. One by one, they agreed to follow me when the time came. I also installed listening devices. Not everywhere, just in strategic locations. Conference rooms, Garrett's office, the break room where Troy and Philip liked to gossip. It wasn't exactly legal, but neither was discrimination, and I figured I'd worry about admissibility later. What I needed was proof. Undeniable, crystal clear proof of their intentions. Meredith helped with that. She'd been my assistant for 3 years, brilliant and underappreciated, watching as less qualified men got promoted over her. When I told her my plan, she'd grinned. I've been waiting for someone to take these assholes down. What do you need? Everything. Every email, every meeting note, every conversation you can document. And I need you to act like you're on their side. She played her role perfectly. For 12 weeks, while I was home with Elena, Meredith sent me daily reports. Meetings where they discussed how to permanently sideline me. Emails where they divided up my clients like spoils of war. Conversations where Garrett explicitly stated that he wanted me gone but needed to do it carefully to avoid a lawsuit. They gave me everything I needed to destroy them, and they never suspected a thing. By the time Elena was 8 weeks old, I'd secured office space. A beautiful corner suite on the 16th floor of the building across the street from my old firm. Floor-to-ceiling windows, modern furniture, a nursery area for Elena. I'd incorporated my company, hired 5 key people away from competitors, and set up all the regulatory requirements for an independent investment advisory firm. Lambert Advisors was born in secret, while my former colleagues congratulated themselves on their clever scheming. Now, sitting in conference room C, I fed Elena and watched my phone light up with incoming messages. Isabella confirming that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission had received my formal complaint and found it substantive enough to investigate. Valerie confirming that the Atlantic Capital Board was having serious concerns about Garrett's firm after hearing rumors of discriminatory practices. Meredith confirming that Troy and Philip were in Garrett's office right now, celebrating their successful takeover of my accounts. I smiled at my daughter. They have no idea, Elena. No idea at all. 20 minutes later, I walked back into Garrett's office without knocking. Troy and Philip were indeed there, sprawled in chairs like they owned the place. Garrett looked annoyed at the interruption until he saw the expression on my face. "We need to talk," I said. "Now." "Paige, if this is about the position we discussed, I really need time to—" I dropped a thick manila envelope on his desk. Papers spilled out, and I watched their faces as they started to recognize what they were seeing. "Page 3, I said conversationally. "That's a transcript of a conversation recorded in this office on September 15th. Garrett, you're discussing how to ease Paige out without creating liability." "Your words, not mine." Garrett's face went white. Troy sat up straight, suddenly alert. "Page 7. Troy, those are your texts to Philip about making my accounts your permanent territory. Very entrepreneurial of you." "Where did you get these?" Philip demanded. "Oh, I have my sources. Page 12 is particularly interesting. That's the email chain where all three of you decided to offer me a demotion with a 60% pay cut. You explicitly state that you think I'll either accept it out of desperation or quit. Either way, you get rid of the maternity liability." I pulled out another document. These are sworn notarized statements from 15 of my former clients. Each one confirms that they were told by either Troy or Philip that I had voluntarily stepped away from active client management to focus on motherhood. Each one was assured that they were being transitioned to a new advisor because I wouldn't be returning at full capacity. "That's," Troy started. "A lie?" "Yes. A massive, documented lie. See, the problem with stealing someone's clients is that some of those clients are actually loyal. They don't appreciate being lied to, and they're very willing to testify about it." I set down a third document. This is a letter from the EEOC. They've reviewed my complaint, along with the substantial evidence I provided, and they're opening a formal investigation into pregnancy discrimination, retaliation, and hostile work environment. That's federal, boys. The kind of investigation that makes headlines and scares away merger partners. The room was dead silent. Garrett looked like he might vomit. Lynette, who'd followed me in, had her hand over her mouth. "But wait," I said cheerfully. "There's more." I pulled out the final document, and this was the one I'd been saving, the one that would end them. These are client transfer authorizations. 15 clients, representing $3.8 billion in assets under management, have signed paperwork to move their accounts, not to new advisors within this firm, to my firm, Lambert Advisors. We opened this morning at 9 a.m. Troy shot to his feet. "You can't do that!" "I absolutely can. They're my clients, Troy. I built those relationships. I earned their trust. And when you lied to them about why I was gone, you destroyed any trust they had in this firm. So yes, they're coming with me. Today." I watched the realization dawn on their faces. $3.8 billion. That was more than 40% of the firm's total assets under management. Without that revenue, they'd be hemorrhaging money within months. The Atlantic Capital merger they'd been counting on would collapse. The firm itself might not survive. "Oh, and Garrett?" I turned to face him directly. "Valerie Banks asked me to pass along a message. She sits on Atlantic Capital's board, as you know. She's calling for an emergency vote tomorrow about your merger. Something about concerns regarding your firm's ethical practices and treatment of employees. I can't imagine how that information reached her." Garrett's hands were shaking. "You're destroying everything I built." "No," I corrected. "I'm taking what I built and creating something better. You destroyed your own company the moment you decided pregnancy made women expendable." I picked up Elena, who'd been sleeping peacefully through my entire speech. "Gentlemen, and I use that term loosely, you have 48 hours to prepare for the EEOC investigation. I'd suggest hiring very good lawyers. You're going to need them." I walked toward the door, then paused. "Oh, and Troy? Philip? About those accounts you thought were yours now? My clients will be calling you later today to formally terminate service. I'd appreciate it if you'd process the paperwork quickly. We wouldn't want any delays." Troy found his voice, strangled and desperate. "You can't get away with this. We'll fight it. We'll prove you stole those clients." I laughed. "Stole them? Please." I simply told them the truth about what was happening and offered them an alternative. They made their own choice. Just like I'm making mine. I looked back at Garrett one last time. "You thought 12 weeks of maternity leave made me weak. You thought being a mother would make me less capable, less focused, less dangerous. You were wrong about all of it." Then I left, Elena in my arms, walking out of that office for the last time. Behind me, I could hear shouting, Garrett yelling at Troy and Philip, Lynette frantically trying to call legal. The sound of panic and chaos and an empire beginning to crumble. It sounded like music. The elevator ride down felt like floating. Meredith met me in the lobby, her eyes shining. Everyone's in position? All 5 team members are at the new office. The clients are scheduled to start arriving in an hour. IT has the systems ready. We're operational. We walked across the street together, and I couldn't help looking back at the building I was leaving. 7 years of my life. 7 years of late nights and sacrificed weekends and proving myself over and over again. 7 years of being good enough to make them money, but not good enough to deserve respect. The new office was everything I dreamed of. Bright, modern, efficient. My name on the door, but this time it read, Paige Lambert, founder and CEO. My desk faced windows that looked directly across at my old firm. I'd chosen that view deliberately. I wanted to watch. Valerie Banks arrived first, carrying an enormous flower arrangement and a gift basket. For Elena, and for you. My God, Paige, you actually did it. I had excellent help, I said, gesturing to the team assembled in the conference room. 5 brilliant advisors who'd also grown tired of the toxic culture at our old firm. People who believed in merit over politics, competence over connections. Jonathan Reed arrived next, then Patricia Martinez, then the Kowalskis. One by one, my clients came to see the new firm, to sign the final paperwork, to celebrate what we were building together. By noon, every single transfer was complete. $3.8 billion had left Garrett's firm in a single morning. My phone wouldn't stop ringing. Other clients from the old firm, ones I hadn't even approached, calling to ask if they could join too. Word was spreading fast. By end of day, we'd gained 7 more clients and another $1 billion in assets. The exodus wasn't just happening, it was accelerating. That evening, exhausted but exhilarated, I stood at my window and watched the chaos unfold across the street. Through the glass walls of Garrett's firm, I could see emergency meetings. People rushing back and forth, the distinctive body language of panic. My phone buzzed. A news alert. Investment firm faces federal investigation following mass client exodus. The story detailed the EEOC complaint, the discrimination allegations, and the stunning defection of clients. It mentioned that Atlantic Capital had suspended merger discussions pending the investigation's outcome. Another alert. Garrett Chen placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The board had moved fast. Troy and Philip were mentioned too, suspended without pay while the firm conducted an internal review. I felt Elena stir in the portable crib I'd set up in my office. She was waking up for her evening feeding. I picked her up, held her close, and thought about what the next few weeks would bring. The EEOC investigation would be thorough. The evidence I'd provided was damning. There would be fines, probably settlements, definitely headlines. Careers would end, reputations would be destroyed, and I felt absolutely no guilt about it. The next morning, I arrived at the office early. Elena was with the nanny I'd hired, a wonderful woman named Rosa who understood that I needed flexibility but also needed to work. Through my window, I watched Garrett exit his building, carrying a cardboard box. Security guards flanked him. He was being escorted out, permanently. He looked up at my building, and for a moment, our eyes met through the glass. I saw rage there, and humiliation, and the dawning understanding that he'd underestimated me completely. I raised my coffee cup in a small salute, then turned away. He wasn't worth any more of my attention. Troy and Philip left next, smaller boxes in hand, their faces masks of shock. The golden boys who'd thought they were untouchable, learning that actions had consequences. I felt nothing watching them go. No satisfaction, no vindication, nothing. They were simply irrelevant now. My phone rang. It was a reporter from the Wall Street Journal, wanting a comment about the situation. I'd been expecting this. Isabella had coached me on what to say. I left to start my own firm because I wanted to create a culture that values talent and commitment regardless of personal circumstances, I said carefully. Motherhood doesn't make women less capable. If anything, it requires skills that make us better at our jobs. Multitasking, prioritization, empathy, resilience. The clients who've joined Lambert Advisors understand that. They value competence over outdated stereotypes. The article ran the next day. New firm, founded by former top advisor, highlights ongoing discrimination issues in finance. It was fair and balanced, but the message was clear. Garrett's firm had created its own downfall through discrimination and arrogance. Over the following weeks, more stories emerged. Other women at the firm came forward with their own experiences of discrimination. Men too, describing a toxic culture where loyalty to Garrett mattered more than performance. The EEOC investigation expanded. Class action lawsuits were filed. Lambert Advisors, meanwhile, thrived. We gained more clients every week, not just from Garrett's former firm, but from across the industry. People who'd heard about what we were building and wanted to be part of it. Within 2 months, we managed $6 billion in assets. Within 4 months, $8 billion. I hired carefully, building a team that reflected the culture I wanted to create. Diverse, talented, committed. People who understood that success came from collaboration, not competition. That supporting each other made everyone stronger. Elena came to the office with me regularly. I'd had a beautiful nursery built, complete with changing table, crib, rocking chair. On days when Rosa had her off, or when I just wanted my daughter close, she'd spend hours there while I worked. Clients loved it. They'd hold her during meetings, coo at her while we discussed investment strategies. She became the unofficial mascot of Lambert Advisors, a symbol of what we stood for. 4 months after I walked out of Garrett's office, his firm collapsed completely. The EEOC fines were substantial. The lawsuits were settled for millions. Atlantic Capital withdrew completely. Without the merger, without major clients, without their top performers, the firm couldn't sustain itself. It was acquired by a larger company for pennies on the dollar, and the name disappeared from the industry entirely. Garrett himself faced worse. The investigation revealed not just discrimination, but financial irregularities, misappropriated client funds, fraudulent reporting, ethical violations. He was barred from the industry permanently and faced criminal charges. Last I heard, he was looking at prison time. Troy and Philip fared slightly better. They found jobs at smaller firms, significant steps down from where they'd been. Their reputations were permanently tarnished. Whenever their names came up in industry circles, people remembered them as the advisors who'd tried to steal a colleague's clients while she was on maternity leave, not the legacy they'd hoped for. I thought about reaching out to them once, to tell them there were no hard feelings. But that would have been a lie. There were feelings. Anger, yes, but also disappointment that they'd been so short-sighted. They could have been part of something good. Instead, they'd chosen betrayal, and it had cost them everything. 6 months after founding Lambert Advisors, we held our first company retreat. 20 employees now, managing nearly $10 billion in assets. We gathered in a conference room with views of the mountains, and I stood in front of them with Elena on my hip. I want to tell you why I started this firm, I began. Not the official reason, about wanting independence and building something new. The real reason. I told them about the discrimination, about walking back from maternity leave to find my career dismantled. About the choice I'd faced. Accept it or fight back. I chose to fight, I said, but not the way they expected. I didn't fight to get my old job back or to punish them for what they'd done. I fought by building something better. Something that wouldn't just survive without their toxicity, but would thrive because of its absence. I looked around the room at faces I'd carefully selected. People who got it. People who understood that success didn't require stepping on others. That's what Lambert Advisors is. It's proof that you can build an exceptional company while also treating people with dignity and respect, that you can be profitable and ethical. That parenthood and career aren't incompatible unless you make them so. The applause was genuine, warm. These people believed in what we were creating. They'd left secure positions to take a chance on a startup led by a woman with a 3-month-old baby. And it was paying off. That evening, I stood in my office alone, Elena asleep in her crib, and looked across at the building where I'd spent 7 years of my life. It was mostly dark now, only a few windows lit. The new owners had cleaned house, brought in their own team. Nothing remained of what Garrett had built. I thought about the Paige who'd stood in that empty office 6 months ago, shocked and hurt and angry. She'd been strong, but she hadn't known just how strong. She'd been capable, but she hadn't realized the full extent of her capabilities. It had taken betrayal to show her what she was truly capable of achieving. I thought about what I'd say to her if I could go back. It gets better. It gets so much better. The pain you're feeling right now, that humiliation and rage, it's going to fuel something extraordinary. They're giving you a gift, even though they don't realize it. They're giving you freedom. Freedom from trying to please people who will never value you. Freedom to build exactly what you want, exactly how you want it. Freedom to prove that their way isn't the only way, and it definitely isn't the best way. Elena stirred, making small sounds in her sleep. I picked her up gently, held her against my chest, felt her heartbeat against mine. You know what the funny thing is, baby girl? I whispered. They thought you made me weak. They thought motherhood would distract me, slow me down, make me less dangerous. They had no idea that you made me absolutely fearless. Because that's what they'd never understood. Having Elena hadn't made me less focused on my career. It had made me unwilling to accept anything less than what I deserved. It had made me realize that I was modeling for her what it meant to be a woman in the world, and I'd be damned if I was going to model acceptance of discrimination and disrespect. The lawsuits eventually settled. My personal case against Garrett's firm resulted in a 7-figure payment, which I donated to organizations supporting women in finance. I didn't need their money. I had something better. I had my own success, built on my own terms. The other women who'd come forward received settlements too, and several of them ended up joining Lambert Advisors. We became known in the industry as the firm that stood for something. The firm where talent mattered more than politics, where family life was supported rather than penalized, where success was measured by results rather than FaceTime. A year after that terrible day when I'd found my nameplate in the trash, I received an unexpected email. It was from Garrett. He'd been released on bail pending trial and apparently had time for reflection. The email was long, rambling, full of justifications and excuses, but buried in the middle was something that might have been an apology. "I see now that I underestimated you," he wrote. "I let my assumptions about mothers in the workplace cloud my judgment. I made decisions based on outdated thinking, and it cost me everything. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you built, what you're doing at Lambert Advisors, it's changing the industry. I hope that counts for something." I read it 3 times, trying to decide how I felt. Angry, vindicated, satisfied. In the end, I felt mostly sad. Sad that it had taken complete destruction for him to understand what should have been obvious. Sad that other women would face similar battles in other firms. Sad that we still lived in a world where motherhood was seen as a liability rather than an asset. But I also felt hopeful. Because change was happening. Slowly, painfully, but happening. Other firms were reviewing their parental leave policies, examining their biases, trying to create more inclusive cultures. Not out of altruism necessarily, but because they'd seen what happened when you pushed talented people too far. They'd seen the cost of discrimination, both financial and reputational. They were learning, finally, that doing the right thing was also good business. I didn't reply to Garrett's email. There was nothing to say. He was my past, and I was focused on my future. Elena turned 1 in a celebration at the office. Clients came, employees brought their families, and we filled the space with balloons and laughter and the sound of children playing. I watched my daughter take her first wobbly steps across the conference room floor, and I thought about all the steps we'd both taken to get here. At 2 years old, Elena started calling my office Mama's building. She'd point at it when we drove past, proud and possessive. She didn't know the full story yet, didn't understand the betrayal and the battle and the victory. Someday I'd tell her. Someday, when she was old enough to understand, I'd explain that sometimes the worst things that happen to you become the catalysts for the best things you create. Lambert Advisors continued to grow. By the end of year 2, we managed $15 billion in assets. We'd opened a second office in New York and were planning a third in San Francisco. Industry publications wrote articles about our rapid growth, our innovative client service model, our commitment to work-life balance. We'd become the firm that top talent wanted to join, that clients wanted to work with, that competitors studied and tried to emulate. I hired a chief operating officer to handle day-to-day management, giving me more time to focus on strategy and spending time with Elena. I'd learned that success wasn't about working the most hours or sacrificing everything for your career. It was about working smart, building the right team, and creating systems that didn't require your constant presence to function. Some nights, after Elena was asleep, I'd sit on our balcony and think about alternative timelines. What if I'd accepted that demotion? What if I'd tried to fight from within the system rather than burning it down? What if I'd been less angry, more conciliatory, more willing to compromise? I always came to the same conclusion. This way was better. Not easier, definitely not safer, but better, because I hadn't just saved my own career. I'd created opportunities for dozens of other people. I'd proven that a different kind of firm could succeed. I'd changed the conversation, even if just a little, about what women could achieve. 3 years after starting Lambert Advisors, I was invited to speak at a women's leadership conference. The room was packed with hundreds of women at various stages of their careers. Some were fresh out of college, idealistic and ambitious. Others were seasoned professionals, battle-scarred, but still fighting. I saw myself in all of them. "They will underestimate you," I told them. "If you're a woman, if you're a mother, if you're anything that doesn't fit their narrow definition of what leadership looks like, they will underestimate you. And here's what I want you to understand, that underestimation is your secret weapon." I told them about coming back from maternity leave to find my office gone, about the nameplate in the trash, about the men who thought they could erase me. They thought they knew what I was capable of. They thought they had me figured out. They were wrong. I told them about the 12 weeks I'd spent preparing, about the listening devices and the client meetings and the careful documentation, about building Lambert Advisors in secret while they congratulated themselves on their victory. Let them underestimate you. Let them think you're distracted, emotional, not quite capable enough. And while they're busy assuming you're weak, you build, you prepare, you create something they never saw coming. The applause was thunderous. Afterward, dozens of women came up to share their own stories. Stories of discrimination and dismissal, of being passed over and pushed aside. But also stories of fighting back, of finding their power, of refusing to accept treatment they didn't deserve. One woman, probably in her early 30s and visibly pregnant, waited until everyone else had left. "I'm terrified," she admitted. "I love my job, but I know what's coming. I've seen how they treat women who come back from maternity leave. They get sidelined, and I don't know if I'm strong enough to fight it." I looked at her, at this younger version of myself, and I took her hands. Here's what I learned. You're stronger than you think. You're more capable than they believe. And if they try to push you aside, you have choices. You can fight to stay. You can negotiate for better. Or you can build something new. But whatever you choose, don't let them convince you that motherhood makes you less. It doesn't. It makes you more strategic, more efficient, more determined. It makes you someone who will not settle for less than you deserve. She squeezed my hands, tears in her eyes. Thank you. And if you need help, I added, call me. Lambert Advisors is always looking for talented people. She did call, 3 months later. She'd gone back to work after having her son, found her role diminished and her career stalled, and decided she deserved better. She joined my firm and became one of our top advisors. Her story wasn't exactly like mine, but it was similar enough. The details change, but the pattern remains depressingly consistent. By year 4, Lambert Advisors managed $20 billion in assets. We'd been profitable from day one, and were now among the fastest-growing firms in the industry. More importantly, we had a retention rate of 98%. People who came to work for us stayed. They stayed because they were valued, because they could have careers and lives, because excellence was rewarded regardless of gender or parental status. Elena started preschool. On her first day, the teacher asked each child what their parents did for work. When it was Elena's turn, she said proudly, "My mama builds things. She built a whole company because some people were mean to her, and now her company is the biggest and the best." The teacher later told me she'd been charmed by Elena's confidence. "She clearly thinks you can do anything." "That's because I want her to know she can do anything," I replied. "I want her to grow up believing that if someone tries to limit her, she has the power to break through those limits. I want her to see that being a mother doesn't mean sacrificing your dreams. It means expanding them." Sometimes I wondered what Troy and Philip were doing, whether they'd learned anything from their downfall. I heard through industry connections that Troy had moved to a small firm in the Midwest, far from the power centers where he'd once thrived. Philip had left finance entirely, apparently burned out by the scandal and the lawsuits. I felt a twinge of something that might have been pity. They'd had talent. They'd had opportunities. They'd thrown it all away because they couldn't see past their own entitlement. Meredith, who'd become my chief of staff, sometimes brought up the old days. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked once. "The way it went down? The public nature of it?" I thought about it. No, because making it public, making it impossible to hide or minimize, that's what created change. If I'd handled it quietly, accepted a settlement with a non-disclosure agreement, nothing would have changed. Other women would have faced the same treatment. But because it was loud and messy and very public, it became a cautionary tale. Firms saw what happened and realized they couldn't afford to treat pregnant women as disposable anymore. So you'd do it the same way again? Every single time. Year 5 brought new challenges. Competition intensified as other firms tried to replicate our model. Economic uncertainty made clients nervous. We had growing pains as we expanded into new markets, but we'd built something solid, something that could weather storms. Elena turned 5, and I threw her a birthday party at the office. She wanted her friends to see Mama's building, to understand what her mother had created. Watching her run through the halls with her friends, laughing and playing, I felt a profound sense of accomplishment that had nothing to do with assets under management or industry rankings. This was the legacy I was building. Not just a successful firm, but proof that women didn't have to choose between career and family. That success could look different from the traditional model. That strength came in many forms, including the strength to walk away from what wasn't serving you and build something better. On the 5th anniversary of Lambert Advisors' founding, we held a celebration. 200 employees now, offices in 5 cities, $25 billion in assets under management. I stood before my team and felt overwhelming gratitude. 5 years ago, I walked into an office that had been emptied of everything I'd built. I found my nameplate in the trash, and I had a choice. I could fight to reclaim what they'd taken, or I could build something new, something better. I chose to build. I looked around the room at faces I trusted, at people who shared my vision. What we've created here isn't just a business, it's a statement. It's proof that you can be profitable and ethical, that you can be excellent and humane, that success doesn't require sacrificing your values or your life outside work. The applause filled the room, and I felt Elena squeeze my hand. She was old enough now to understand some of what had happened, to know that Mama's company existed because bad people had done bad things, and Mama had fought back. Later that night, alone in my office, I stood at the window one last time. The building across the street, where I'd spent 7 years of my life, was dark. A different company occupied it now. All traces of Garrett's firm were gone, erased as completely as they'd tried to erase me. I thought about the woman I'd been 5 years ago. Pregnant, ambitious, naive enough to think competence would protect her. I thought about the woman I'd become, still ambitious but wiser now, scarred but stronger, successful beyond what I'd imagined possible. The journey from that day to this one had been hard. There had been moments of doubt, nights when I'd wondered if I was doing the right thing, times when the stress felt overwhelming. But I'd never regretted my choice. Not once. Because here's what I'd learned. Sometimes the worst thing that happens to you is actually a gift in disguise. It forces you to confront who you really are and what you're truly capable of achieving. It strips away the comfortable lies you tell yourself and shows you your real strength. They took my office. They threw my nameplate in the trash. They thought they could make me disappear. Instead, they freed me to become more than I'd ever imagined possible. They freed me to build an empire. And as I looked down at the city lights, Elena sleeping peacefully in the next room and my thriving company around me, I realized something profound. I'd won. Not just the battle against Garrett and his firm, but the larger war. The war against being underestimated, against being seen as less than, against accepting treatment I didn't deserve. I'd won by refusing to disappear, by refusing to accept their limitations, by building something so undeniably successful that it changed the conversation for everyone who came after me. My phone buzzed. Another client signing on, another billion in assets. Lambert Advisors continued to grow, continued to thrive, continued to prove every single day that they'd been wrong about me. They thought motherhood made me weak. They thought 12 weeks away would diminish me. They thought they could erase 7 years of excellence with a nameplate in the trash. They were wrong about everything. And I'd spent 5 glorious years proving it.